Okay, I think we might have what might be one of the games of the year here in the Big East coming up with UConn and St. John's at Gamble, 8 o'clock, primetime Friday night game. So joining me today to break it all down, Zach Braziller of the New York Post. So Zach, thanks so much for coming on.
Hey, my pleasure. Should be fun.
Yeah, good to have you back on to talk UConn St. John's here. I know this is a matchup everyone's really looking forward to. I'm curious to start. I know there were some elevated expectations for St. John's heading into this year two of Rick Pitino as he works to build this program back to a higher level. How much? Because I would have to assume that this season has exceeded the expectations you had coming into it so far. Is that the case? And if so, how much?
Yeah, look, I don't think anyone thought 20-3, 11-1. Um, it's funny, like the preseason narrative being worried about the shooting has obviously come true. They're not a good shooting team, but it they do just like they basically do everything else well, and but shooting. And yeah, I mean, like, their trip to the Bahamas was a bit disappointing. Where they went 1-2, really should have won the Baylor game.
Yeah.
Um, they lost a double overtime on, there was a clock malfunction, but even with that, they still should have won. They missed like they're up 5 with 10 seconds left. They miss some free throws, and then they lose to Georgia. It was like their third game, basically 3.5 days. It was an 11 a.m. tip,
Yeah.
and Georgia's not a bad team, but still is a game I think if they play normal, uh, with normal conditions, they win. Um, but since then, I mean, look, they lose a 1 point game at Creighton, a game they probably should have won despite having an awful day shooting. Had like 11 point lead in the first half. But yeah, I mean, look, it's since then they've won 9 in a row. And I know before Marquette, there was this theory, well, they haven't beaten anyone,
Yeah.
which was fair to an extent, although I think the sweeping Xavier is better than people realize. You look at Xavier's schedule. I've been saying this now for a few weeks. I mean, they're 6-6 in the league, but look, they've played UConn twice, they played St. John's twice, they played Marquette twice, they've played Creighton once. So like, I'd be shocked if Xavier doesn't end up winning 11, 12 league games here. Probably 11. They're probably going to drop one more. But so I do think the Xavier wins are better than, especially the win there,
Mhm.
um, are better than maybe people realize. But they look, they do what you see what UConn has done last year. They do what really good teams do. You beat the teams you're supposed to beat, and for the most part, they've done so convincingly. I think like either 14 or 15 of their 20 wins are by double figures. They're basically a top 20 team in every metric across the board. Yeah, I mean, look, they're the best defensive team St. John's has had in forever. They're in terms of Ken Palm, it's their best ever at this point. And they've been really good and they're getting better. Kadari Richmond has been awesome the last 8 or 9 games. Now, Davon Smith, who to me is one of their most impactful players, is now just kind of hitting his stride. He missed a few weeks with a shoulder injury. He finally kind of got going late in that Marquette win, made some big plays, and their offense before he got hurt, he hurt his shoulder January 11th against Villanova. Before he
Mhm.
got hurt, they were a top 50 offense, and without him, they've fallen down to around low 70s. I think they're a better offensive team than that. And when he's going, he gives them a different element. He's a solid 3 point shooter. He's the key to their transition. He's just an incredible athlete. We really haven't seen him and Kadari Richmond kind of going at the same time.
Mhm.
So that ever happens, to me, it takes them to a different level than even we've seen so far this year.
Yeah, I wanted to dive into Kadari Richmond a little bit because it seems like the past few games something's really kind of clicked for him and he's become a little bit more assertive out there, a little bit of a different kind of player. What have you seen from him recently as St. John's has been on this winning streak here?
He's playing with a lot more pace. You could talk about aggression or whatever, but he's he's not, he's just going, and the mid-range jumper has been incredible of late. He's even hit some threes, and we all know he's not really a three-point shooter, so he's not hesitating with that as much. Yeah, he's been, I mean, the last few games he's been as good as you can ask for. I mean, double doubles, putting up big assist numbers. I mean, the last 2 games he was a few assists away from a triple double.
Yeah.
So he's been fantastic. Zubi Ejiofor to me has been the biggest surprise of this team and to me in the conference. he was a backup last year, and now he's the number. I think he's the number two offensive rebounder in the country. He's kind of transformed their defense because now they have a center who's a rim protector, but can also guard on the perimeter. Marquette was putting him in pick and rolls and getting him to switch on their guards, and he was staying with them and locking them down. And we've kind of seen that all year with him. Just his ability to switch, his athleticism. That to me is what makes their defense is they have athletic guys who can guard several different positions. So, and they love to, and they switch everything. Last year with Joel Soriano, as good as he was, when he got on guards, it created major problems. So now this year with Ejiofor's ability to kind of switch and guard different positions, it's kind of really changed who they are defensively.
Hey, and Zuby could pop and take a couple threes from time to time now, right? Is that what I'm
Yeah,
seeing?
no, he's just improved so much. You know, second half of last year he started playing better. You could see the potential, but I don't think anyone really thought you would see this. You know, look, they went after some big guys in the portal, Omarui, Amari Williams, who ended up
Yeah.
at Kentucky, a few others. They ended up taking Vinci Chukwu from USC, who was their backup center, and there was initial some thought that Vince was a big recruit. Um, he had some heart issues early in his career at USC. There was even some thought he might even be the starting center.
Yeah.
But I mean, look, that's obviously ended pretty quick when you saw workouts this summer. I mean, Zuby, I think, has a chance to be one of the best players in the country next year. The expectation is he'll be back. He's really developed into a terrific player.
As you look at this St. John's team and try to kind of pick them apart a little bit, if you're looking for a weakness in this team, I know obviously the 3-point shooting isn't, top tier. Is that the biggest weakness of this team, or is there something else that, Dan Hurley and his team are looking to kind of exploit heading into this one?
Yeah, look, there's no doubt. You've seen more teams zone them. Georgetown had some success zoning them. Xavier did a little. You saw Marquette a little bit. The one issue teams have with zoning them, as we all know, when you're in a zone, it's harder to
Yeah.
defensive rebound
Yeah.
because you don't have guys to match up and box out. And so I think a lot of teams have stayed away from that because St. John's is such a good offensive rebound team. I mean, that's why they can get away with being a bad shooting team because sometimes their best offense is just getting the ball on the rim.
Yeah.
I think the other issue besides the 3-point shooting is depth. They don't have great depth. Brady Dunlap, probably their best shooter, has missed most of the season. He's now out for the year with a torn abdominal muscle. So they're really seven, maybe eight deep. You know,
Okay.
they basically have six starters.
Yeah.
Where you have Aaron Scott, Zuby, R.J. Lewis, Kadari, Davon, and Simeon Wilcher. So you have six guys, and they have Ruben Prey, a forward from Portugal, who's a pretty good defender. His offense is still a work in progress. He's only a freshman, but he's a guy who started to play a little more. Then you have a four-star freshman, Jaden Glover, who can shoot. He's athletic, but he doesn't really play a ton. So they're really mostly go seven, maybe eight deep. So they don't have great depth, but the thing that's impressive is they still play so hard, and they're actually wearing teams out despite that lack of depth. That last year's team, their problem was they couldn't finish games.
Yeah.
They'd be in a million close games, and they just until the end when they got going, the last 2, 3 weeks of the season, like they had a million losses at the end. They had a few to UConn. This team, despite those shooting issues and not being a great free throw shooting team, I mean they've owned the last 5 minutes of these league games. They were down 15 to Providence, down 15 to Georgetown, down 15 to Xavier. They came back and won those games. Marquette the other day, Marquette was up a point with like 5 minutes left, and St. John's crushed them the last 5 minutes. That's to me the most impressive thing is with how hard they play. They don't wear down. They
Mhm.
wear the other team down, and that's speaks to their conditioning. It speaks to their toughness. Speaks to their grit because they these last few minutes they hit a gear that a lot of these teams don't have.
Yeah. You watch St. John's game, and I mean, I'm taken by the defensive effort they put in and night out. What makes this team so special defensively?
Yeah, I mean to me it's their positional size.
Mhm.
When they could go Kadari at the two at 6'6".
Yeah.
They go RJ Lewis, who's a super athlete at 6'7" at the three. Aaron Scott, who's 6'7", 6'8" at the four. And then you have Zuby, who's 6'9", but he plays bigger than that. So like there are very few teams that have that athleticism and length on the wing and on the perimeter. So that's really where they're hurting teams on the glass with it, with Lewis, with Richmond, with Scott, and with Zuby, where like, there are very few teams who have that kind of positional size and they have that the combination of positional size and athleticism that you really just don't see much from many teams in this league.
I'm curious because I know you watch so much college basketball, Big East basketball. From what you've seen from this UConn team, what do you think they could do that would give this St. John's team some issues?
I feel like UConn's been playing better defensively. I know the numbers are bad. It's jarring to see a UConn team sub 100 in defense,
Yeah.
but I do feel like they've been playing better defensively of late. I feel like they've been playing harder on the perimeter. Um, I think, if Samson Johnson can stay out of foul trouble, having a rim protector could give St. John's problems. If you look at the games where St. John's has struggled offensively, it's been teams who have that length and athleticism that could, limit their easy baskets. You saw it
Mhm.
with the Creighton game where Ryan Kalkbrenner is obviously an all-time great defensive player, but he really gave St. John's issues once they got in the lane. Georgia plays multiple big guys and is a good rebounding team. So they gave St. John's problems because they kept them off the glass. So I think that is one area that you kind of could give them problems if limiting St. John's second chances it is to me is a huge thing when you play them. A lot of people say like, let's say we get to the tournament, like what would worry you the most? And a lot of people say, well, what if they face a hot 3-point shooting team?
Yeah.
Like that to me isn't something that would worry me because they defend the three really well. I know the overall numbers aren't great, but if you look in league play, they've really defended the three well. The issue they have is when they face someone who's going to keep them off the offensive glass. So if they're not going to make threes, which usually they don't, but they don't get more opportunities.
Mhm.
So like they're taking so many more shots than the other team. Against them in the Marquette game, they went to while they missed a ton of free throws, they went so many times.
Yeah.
So they made 17 free throws, even though they missed 14 of them. They're getting more chances than the other team, and that's been such a big part of their success. Um, the other part of their success is transition. They turn you over a lot and they get out in transition. Now that transition game isn't quite as strong without Smith, which was why I was so impressed that they were able to keep winning without him.
Mhm.
But now that he's back, he turns defensive rebounds into fast breaks. He turns turnovers into fast breaks. And when you have him, Richmond, Lewis, who's as good a transition player as there is in this league, even Aaron Scott, like Simeon Wilcher is very good in transition. So defensive rebounds and turnovers become easy points for them. You want to beat St. John's, you want to limit their easy points. You want to make them earn it. You want to make them hit jumpers, hit threes, and don't give them those second and third opportunities.
Looking to add some local flavor to your lineup? Martin Rosals is the MVP of your game day spread and a slam dunk for any occasion. Proudly made in hard-hit New Britain, their famous kielbasa and hot dogs have been a fan favorite for over 96 years. You can find their products in grocery stores across the state or have them delivered directly to your home court, coast to coast, via martinrosal.com. Take your taste buds to the championship and go support a UConn fan-owned business. I know you mentioned Samson Johnson a little bit earlier and talking about, what he can offer in terms of rim protection. Like from Rick Pitino and his staff standpoint, who's the guy on this UConn roster you think they're most concerned about heading into Friday's game?
I think it has to be solo ball. I mean, he's been absolutely awesome of late. We all know what he did against Marquette. One thing St. John's has done really well is they've been able to slow down the other team's best player for the
Hmm.
most part. Cam Jones, it took him 15 shots to get 15 points the other day.
Yeah.
Um, Sorber had, Georgetown 2 games didn't really do much against them at all. Um, they did a really good job on Zach Fremantle, and in the first game, Ryan Conwell couldn't throw the ball in the ocean against them. They've done a really good job against the other team's best player. Sometimes a secondary guy will hurt them, like in the Providence game where Abdur Rahim went nuts from
Mhm.
three, although some of those were just ridiculous shots. So to me, it's St. John's going to make the other guys beat them. I do not. They're going to be all over solo ball. They're going to put size on them. They're going to put length on them. But so so other guys from UConn are probably going to have to make shots. Whether that's Caravan. We'll see what McNeely has after
Yeah.
missing so much time. But yeah, I would expect that Solo Ball is the guy that they're going to say like we can't let him beat us.
Yeah, no, I'd agree, and I'm very curious to see what the Liam McNeely impact is if he does end up playing in this one. Just given that he's one of those guys that has some of that size that could match up with some of these guys here on St. John's. Um, I want to just I know how much you're into the Big East here as you've been around seeing these teams from the league come through play St. John's. Uh, who outside of St. John's do you think you'd throw as most likely to win this league at this point in the regular season? If I told you you couldn't take St. John's.
I think you got to talk Creighton. You
Hmm.
know, I mean, like, look, they've already gone to Marquette, already gone to UConn, so they get those teams in their building. We all know how tough they are in their building. They have the win over St. John's. They beat Xavier in their place. I think it's going to be tough for UConn to win the league just because they're already two behind St. John's here before Friday night, and I think those Xavier and Villanova losses are going to be tough for them to overcome.
Hmm.
It's going to be tough for UConn to win at Creighton. They still got to deal with Marquette. Still got to go to Providence, which isn't easy, despite Providence's issues. I think it's Creighton. That St. John's Creighton game at the Garden in about what is it, 10 days or 9 days or
Yeah.
so, is going to be a big one. Because if obviously if Creighton has the two head-to-head wins, that gives them a big edge over St. John's. And look, I think Marquette's going to find it here. They haven't played great of late. I thought St. John's would beat them just because you look at what Marquette has done lately. Where they struggled to beat DePaul, they struggled to beat Butler, lost in their building to Xavier, they lost the UConn game. Um, but I do think Marquette is obviously still a factor. They get St. John's in their building, they still get UConn, they still get Marquette. Yeah, I think right now, I think Creighton would be the concern because their schedule is more favorable than St. John's,
Hmm.
and they have that win over St. John's. So that would be the team. Now I think St. John's beats them at the Garden. I do. Um, I think St. John's made a big mistake not pressing them in that game in Creighton. They didn't really until like the last few minutes. And St. John's press has been really good when they've gone to it this year. It was the key to them beating Butler on a night when they shot 1 of 21 from three. Um, but yeah, I think right now look, this is a huge game. I mean, if St. John's ever won this game Friday night, they're in the driver's seat to win this league. There's no
Definitely.
question about that. Even if they lose, I still think they're in a good spot. But if they ever won this game Friday night, I think it's hard to see them not winning this league.
Yeah, no, I think I'd agree with you on that. We obviously saw both, especially St. John's in the game against Marquette the other night, go to the free throw line a ton. I know you see a lot of these Big East officials come through. What do you think the kind of the state of Big East officiating is right now? Because I think if there's one thing that unites Big East fan bases online, it's their dislike of a lot of the officials in this league.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, I watch a lot of other games, and I don't think I think it's just the state of officiating isn't great.
Hmm.
You watch some of these other games. I watched um, New Mexico play a few weeks ago, and I was stunned by how awful the officiating was. Um, you know, you watch some of these other leagues, it's not great either.
Yeah.
Do I think the officiating in this league is good? No, it's not. I feel like the team that gets the best whistle of anyone's Creighton, personally.
Yeah.
And I know they have this rep for never fouling, but it's amazing to me um, the calls they get personally. But yeah, St. John's has definitely got a good whistle at home. There's no question. And this is a team that historically never really has gotten a favorable whistle, but I don't think it's a Big East issue. I think it's a country. I think it's a nationwide issue. Like I
Yeah.
think if you watch other leagues closely, you would see the same stuff we see in this league.
I I'm just trying to think back from at least my time as a college basketball fan. It really does seem like this is the first time in a long time that New York City is starting to get behind this St. John's team. As a guy who's there, living, breathing it, what is it like on the ground in terms of like fan support around St. John's right now?
Yeah, look, there's excitement. I mean, I felt there was excitement last year. Um, they went into that, they had that deep slump where they lost 8 of 10. They lost a million close games and people were down about it. But yeah, I mean, Patino has brought just a completely new um, era and belief and excitement. And, the other night was probably the best atmosphere of the Marquette game. They had over 16,000. It was the best atmosphere I can remember in a long time, probably since Chris Mullins last season. That team made the
Mhm.
first four, and they beat Villanova at the Garden, a game they trailed by 17, and um, it was a sellout. It was just It was an awesome atmosphere. That was probably the best atmosphere I've ever been at for a St. John's game. And they won that game, and everyone thought all right, here they are, they've arrived. And then the team kind of went in the tank, and then they lost the first four to Arizona State. It was just an awful,
Yeah.
awful game. That team didn't build off that momentum. But yeah, I mean, there's incredible excitement. A lot of money is coming through the program. It's a big part of why they're successful in this NIL age. And you have Mike Rapoli, and you have a lot of boosters who are
Mhm.
absolutely thrilled about what's going on. You have, new athletic director Ed Cull, who's an awesome fundraiser and is a New York guy, and he worked at St. John's two different times, and he really understands New York City. And yeah, I mean it's a really fun time for New York basketball. I mean the Knicks are really good. They have a huge game Saturday night at the Garden against the Celtics, and St. John's is in a position to potentially get a protected seed, which is, I mean, I think most people enter the year would be like, get in the tournament, maybe win a game, it'd be a great year.
Yeah.
Um, for this team to even be in position to be a potential four seed is kind of is just a new is just something you haven't really experienced. I've been covering this team for a decade, and I always said I want to cover what it's like to cover like an actual good St. John's team, not a team that's on the bubble or may
Yeah.
get in the group, but like an actual legitimately good top 20 team. And it's fun, man. People are excited, and um, people are really into it. And I the Marquette game was great at the Garden, and the Xavier game was really good and was a lot of fun. The Providence game was an awesome crowd. They had over 18,000, and obviously the UConn game will be sold out. And the Creighton game, which is a Sunday afternoon at 3, I think is going to be just a great atmosphere. Like it's really exciting. It's really
Yeah.
fun, and it's interesting. This feels like for once these two programs are kind of on even footing now. Um, Coming in here, um, maybe one team is a little better than the other. Who knows? It's still February, but I feel like there's an even playing field for once between these two programs, which hasn't really happened in a long time.
Yeah, I think it'll be really interesting to see what happens come Friday night here, and we'll have to have you back on to talk about the other side of tri-state area basketball.
So what do UConn people think about this team?
I mean, I think it's been an interesting, definitely an interesting season for sure, given the lows of Maui picking
Right.
things back up. They had won, I think it was 8 in a row at the time before McNeely went down. I mean, winning at Villanova is always a little tricky, even at Villanova in a down year. But I think you've started to see this team pull together a little bit. You're relying on a lot of guys who didn't get much playing time last year, and Jaden Ross, Jalen Stewart, especially with Liam McNeely out. So I think it's a team that's starting to hit its stride a little bit. And I think this game comes at a really interesting time. I mean, they go on the road, beat up Marquette. I mean, that game wasn't close, and now they've had basically a week off to get ready for this St. John's team. I think it's going to be a really interesting matchup. I mean, they had way too many turnovers against Marquette, which I think will be interesting to see how that plays out against a team like St. John's, who, as you mentioned, especially in transition offense, is really good. So I think it's a really interesting matchup. You get Hurley and Patino, two guys who I'm sure love each other very much, and uh, and go there. But I think this one is. I mean, I always had this game circled, but just given what St. John's has done over the past, month and a half here, I think it makes this one even more exciting.
It kind of feels like house money to me for St. John's a little. I know the fans don't want to hear that, but they had to go 1-1 this week,
Yeah,
and they get their win, and I feel like the Marquette win will take some pressure off. If they lost that game there and they would have lost this game, then it's like, well,
that,
we played two good teams, we're 0-2, and we still don't have that good win at the top of our resume, even though New Mexico is aged really well for them.
yeah,
Um, but I think Marquette takes a lot of pressure off, and they can kind of play free and loose here. Um, I have noticed UConn fans are really confident. Look, you won the last two national titles. You have every right to be. It's an awesome program. Hurley's a fantastic coach. It's still a really, really good offensive team. I think it's gonna be a really fun game. I mean,
yeah,
it seems like UConn fans expect to win. Look, this is gonna be the first game St. John's is an underdog since Creighton. They were very narrow favorite with Xavier. I think they were only 2.5, 3 against Marquette.
yeah,
But it's a little different. This is obviously Campbell's a really tough place to play. You're facing a really good offensive team, a team that, can at least, St. John's not going to out rebound UConn by 22. They're not going to hammer them on the glass like they've hammered some other teams. the better teams in the league they've beaten, whether it's Xavier, Georgetown, Marquette, especially Xavier and Marquette, they've
Mhm.
crushed them in the glass. And I
Yeah.
don't know if they can just now they might out rebound UConn, but they're not gonna hammer them on the glass. The other thing is UConn struggles with ball dribble penetration, and that's
Yeah.
St. John's has a million guys who can do that,
Yeah, I think
specifically Richmond and Smith.
Yeah, I think the one thing that probably concerns me the most is just some of the size differential between these two guys. I mean, UConn's got some smaller guards back with Hassan Diarra and Solo Ball aren't necessarily the size of what you're having out there with Tristan Newton and Cam Spencer. So it'll be interesting to see how that matchup works. But I mean, if you like college basketball, this is the game you want to see. And it's nice you got Gus Johnson on prime time on a Friday night here at Gamble. I think it makes for a lot of fun.
Yeah, no doubt. It should be a fun one. I'm looking forward to being there.
Yeah, well, Zach, appreciate it as always. Thanks so much for coming on, and we're gonna have to have you back on before the rematch. I don't think I need to have you on to talk Seton Hall at all. So, well,
Man, I feel bad for Seton Hall.
I do too.
It's rough, man. It's rough. They hopefully this is a wake up call and they get some money into that program because in this day and age, it's hard to compete with what they have right now.
Yeah, no, 100%. But Zach, so always appreciate it. Thanks so much, and enjoy this matchup on Friday night.
All right, man. Have a good one.